Look at that stone building behind the farmhouse. No wires, no pipes running to a meter, no monthly bill. And yet the family living there has never once turned a faucet and gotten nothing. Water flows in that house every single day, and it costs them exactly $0. That is not a trick. That is not off-grid fantasy. That is a working system, and versions of it have been running quietly in Amish country for more than 200 years. The people who built it never paid a water company a dime, and they never will. Why does almost no one outside those communities know how it works? Because the knowledge was never sold. It was handed down, kept inside the family, inside the church, inside the barn. There is one method in particular, written into water records that go all the way back to a bleachery in Paisley, Scotland in the year 1804, that can turn rain and runoff into clean drinking water without a filter cartridge, without electricity, without a single thing you have to buy again. I am going to give you that method before we are done. And if you already own a home, an older home, one built before 1980, this matters even more to you because most of what I am about to show you was designed for houses exactly like yours. I want to be honest with you from the start. For most of my life, I did everything the conventional way. I paid the water bill, I paid the sewer fee tacked on behind it. I never questioned the pump, the pressure tank, the softener, any of it. I just wrote the checks. Then I spent time in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and later out in Holmes County, Ohio, and something cracked open in my head that never closed again. The first time I walked out to a spring house near Millersburg, I stood there for a long minute just listening, because I could hear water moving, and I could not find a single machine making it move. There was no hum, no motor, just cold, clear water sliding through a stone trough, keeping milk and butter cold in the middle of July. An old man watched me look around for the switch, and he just smiled and said, "Gravity has been free since the beginning, son. Nobody figured out how to bill you for it yet." That sentence stayed with me for years, and it is the reason I started digging into everything you are about to hear. So let me tell you what these families actually understand that the rest of us forgot. Water does not need electricity to move. It needs a difference in height. That is the whole secret behind the first system, and it is so simple that when you finally see it, you get a little angry that nobody ever told you. The Amish call it a gravity feed. You put a tank up high, and you let the water fall down to the house on its own. There is a number worth remembering here. For every 23 feet of elevation, you get roughly 10 pounds per square inch of water pressure. That is real pressure. That is enough to run a faucet, fill a tub, flush a toilet, feed a garden. A tank on a hill, or up in a barn loft, or on a simple wooden tower gives you running water that will keep flowing when every power line in the county goes dark. The utility wants you to believe that pressure comes from their pump and their grid. It does not. It comes from height. It always did. But here is where it gets interesting, because a tank up high does you no good if you cannot get the water up there in the first place. And that is the problem the Amish solved in about 6 different ways, each one cleverer than the last. The oldest answer is the one everybody pictures. The windmill, not the modern spinning turbine that makes electricity, but the old multi-blade farm windmill that does mechanical work directly. Mother Earth News documented an Amish-built windmill standing 30 feet tall, pulling water up out of a well 110 feet deep, filling stock tanks day and night without a single watt of grid power. The wind turns the blades work a rod up and down, the rod works a pump, and water climbs out of the earth for free. When the tank is full, they simply set the brake and the windmill stops. No timers, no sensors, no bill. That machine has been doing the same honest job on American farms since the 1800s, and it will outlive every smart appliance in your kitchen. Therefore, the next question almost asks itself, what do you do when the wind does not blow? And this is where I found something that genuinely stopped me cold, because it is the answer to a problem people spend thousands of dollars trying to solve today. There is a pump that needs no wind, no sun, no electricity, no engine, and no fuel of any kind. It runs on nothing but falling water, and it will run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for years, with only 2 moving parts. It is called the hydraulic ram, and this is not some new invention. A man named Joseph Montgolfier, one of the same brothers who flew the first hot air balloons, perfected this pump back in 1796. Read that date again. 1796. This technology is older than the light bulb, older than the telephone, older than the United States is now old, and it still works flawlessly, and almost nobody alive has heard of it. Here is how the ram pump works, and I am going to say it plainly because the simplicity is the whole point. You have water flowing downhill, even just a little, from a spring or a creek or a pond. That moving water builds up speed inside a pipe, then a valve slams shut. When flowing water gets stopped suddenly, it creates a pressure spike, a kind of shock that the old-timers called water hammer. Most plumbers spend their lives trying to get rid of water hammer. The ram pump does the opposite. It captures that shock and uses it to push a small amount of the water up much higher than it started. How much higher? A hydraulic ram can lift water to roughly 10 times the height of the fall that drives it. Let that land. A drop of just a few feet at the source can push water up a hill dozens of feet to a tank above your house. And it does this on its own. All day, all night, in the rain, in the dark, while you sleep, forever, for free. The only thing it consumes is the flow that was already running downhill past your property and doing nothing for you at all. I remember standing next to one of these for the first time and just counting the beats. It makes a steady thunk, thunk, thunk like a slow heart. And that heartbeat is the sound of water climbing a hill with no power on earth pushing it but its own weight. A family with a spring on their land and one of these pumps has running water for life, and their total ongoing cost is nothing, not a reduced bill, nothing. And I want you to notice something about that man named Montgolfier and his date of 1796, because it tells you everything. The most elegant water pump ever built for a homestead was already perfected before your great-great-great-grandfather was born. And in all the years since, with all our engineering and all our factories, we did not replace it with something better. We replaced it with something you have to plug in and pay for. That was not progress. That was a sale. But not every farm has a hill or a creek, and the Amish had an answer for the flat ground too, one so ordinary that you have walked right past it in 100 old photographs without ever understanding what you were looking at. The simple hand pump. That cast iron pitcher pump bolted to the edge of a well or a kitchen sink is not a decoration, and it is not a relic. It is a complete, sealed, mechanical machine that will pull water up out of the ground with nothing but the muscle in your arm. A shallow well pump like that can lift water from a well 25 or so feet deep, and a deep well version reaches far, far lower. These pumps have almost nothing inside them to break. A leather or rubber seal, a rod, a handle. That is it. An Amish family thinks nothing of installing one right beside a modern faucet, so that when the power fails for the rest of the county, they simply reach over, work the handle a few times, and keep right on living. You can buy one today, mount it over a well or a driven point on your own land, and you will have water in your hands in a blackout that stretches on for a week. It costs you a few dollars once, and then it costs you nothing for the rest of your life. That is the whole idea, over and over again. Pay once or pay forever. The Amish always chose to pay once. Therefore, in the communities that allow a little more machinery, they took even that idea and made it clever in a way that genuinely surprised me when I first saw it. In parts of Indiana and Ohio, Amish families run their water pumps on nothing but compressed air. They store up air pressure in a tank, sometimes filled by a windmill or a small engine that runs only now and then, and that stored air drives a pump down in the well, pushing water up into the house on demand. Think about what that does. It separates the making of the power from the using of the water. The air is stored quietly whenever it is convenient, and the water comes out the instant you need it, clean and pressurized, with no electric line running to the wellhead at all. It is the same principle as the elevated tank, just held in air instead of held in height. They took a modern idea, stripped the grid right out of it, and made it their own. And every one of these choices points back to the same stubborn refusal. They will not let the water depend on a wire that somebody else controls. Now, you may be thinking you do not have a creek or a spring or a hill, and I hear you, and I promise I have not forgotten about you. Because the whole point of these old systems is that there is one for every situation, no matter your land, no matter your budget, no matter your house. Which brings me to the rain. Every roof in America is a water collection surface, and yours is doing it right now, and you are throwing every drop of it away. Here is the number that changed how I look at my own house. For every 1 inch of rain that falls on 1,000 square feet of roof, you collect about 620 gallons of water. The University of Arizona puts it plainly. A single 1-inch rain will pull 600 gallons off a 1,000 square foot roof, and a modest lot will shed thousands of gallons in one storm. Look at your own roof. Most homes are far bigger than 1,000 square feet. Do the math on a good rainy month in your area and you will find tens of thousands of gallons of clean, soft water running off your gutters and disappearing into the ground. Water you are currently replacing by buying it back from a utility one expensive gallon at a time. The Amish saw that waste generations ago and refused to accept it. They ran their gutters into barrels and into cisterns, big underground storage tanks, some of them holding thousands of gallons, and they lived off the sky. Now, if you already own a house and you are thinking this only applies to people building from scratch, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you. You do not need to build a cistern, and you do not need to tear into your walls. You can start capturing rainwater this weekend with nothing but a barrel, a length of gutter downspout, and an afternoon. A single food-grade barrel under one downspout on an older home will fill completely in one ordinary rainstorm. That water, off your own roof, is soft and free of the chlorine and the minerals the utility sends you, and it is perfect for your garden, your animals, your washing, your emergency reserve. And on an older home built before 1980, you often already have the deep overhangs, the simple roof lines, and the accessible downspouts that make this almost effortless. The Amish did not wait for a permit or a plumber. They put a barrel under the water that was already falling and they caught it. You can do the exact same thing before the next storm rolls through. But catching the rain is only the start, because the first water off a dirty roof carries the dust, the leaves, the bird mess, and the grit that settled up there between storms, and the Amish knew better than to let that first dirty rush into their good storage. So they used a trick so simple it barely sounds like a system, and it is one you can copy this weekend for a couple of dollars. It is called the first flush. You let the first gallons that come off the roof, the dirtiest gallons, divert away and drain to the ground before the clean water starts flowing into your barrel or your cistern. On the old homesteads, this was nothing more than a standpipe or a diverted elbow that filled up and spilled off the first filthy surge, then let the clean water carry on into storage. A short length of pipe, a simple diverter, and suddenly the water landing in your barrel is dramatically cleaner before it ever touches a filter. This is the kind of small, quiet wisdom that never made it into a store brochure, because there is nothing in it for anyone to sell you. It is just a smarter way to catch what is already free. And once you understand that the sky is filling your barrels for free, a bigger idea opens up, because storing water is only half the battle. You also have to keep it. And keeping water, keeping it cold, keeping it clean, keeping it usable through a long hot summer is where the Amish quietly outclass the modern home in ways that will make your electric bill look like a bad joke. That old spring house I stood in near Millersburg was doing the work of a refrigerator, a root cellar, and a walk-in cooler all at once, and it was plugged into absolutely nothing. Cold spring water flows continuously through a stone trough inside the little building, and that constant flow of 50-degree water pulls the heat right out of the room and out of everything sitting in it. Milk, butter, eggs, cheese, cut meat, all kept cold by moving water and stone. No compressor, no coils, no power. It has worked every single day for 200 years, and it never once needed a repairman. Before I show you the rest, I need to tell you something, because this is the exact point where most people realize how much they have been missing. Everything I am walking you through here, the gravity feed, the ram pump, the cistern, the spring house, these are pieces of a much larger body of knowledge that I have spent years pulling together from Amish families, from old farm manuals, and from research nobody reads anymore. I gathered the complete set into a 3-volume collection called The Complete Field Vault, the full buried archive of these suppressed home systems, the water, the heating, the cooling, the pantry, and the pest control formulas, all in one place. There is a special limited time offer on it right now, and you will find it linked in the description with a QR code on the screen you can scan. I am not going to sit here and sell it to you, because what matters is that this knowledge stops disappearing, so let me get right back to the water and the part almost nobody knows. Now, if a family did not have a flowing spring, they made cold the same way our great-grandparents did, and this one is going to surprise you with how well it actually worked. They cut ice. In the dead of winter, when the pond froze thick, Amish families would saw the ice into blocks, haul it up to a small building, and pack it in sawdust or straw. That insulation is so effective that the ice would last deep into the following summer, sometimes almost all the way to the next winter. Think about that. They stored the cold of January and spent it in July. An ice house, packed correctly, gave a family reliable refrigeration through the hottest months of the year using nothing but frozen pond water and a pile of sawdust that most sawmills gave away for free. We were told this was primitive. It was not primitive. It was free. And it worked, and it never once tripped a breaker or ran up a bill. And I want you to picture the sheer independence of that. A man could stand in his ice house in the middle of August, in the worst heat of the year, and pull out a block of the very same water that had frozen solid on his pond back in the dead of winter, cold enough to keep a whole family fed and their milk sweet. He did not owe anyone a thing for it. He had harvested the season itself and put it in the bank. There is a kind of quiet dignity in that, the dignity of a household that provides for its own, and it is exactly the thing that got taken from us one convenient connection at a time. But cold storage goes even deeper underground, and here is a system you can use in almost any older home in America starting today. The root cellar. Just a few feet below the surface, the earth holds a steady temperature all year long, somewhere in the 50s, no matter what the thermometer says up top. The Amish, like the old farmers before them, dug into that free and constant cool to store potatoes, apples, carrots, onions, jars of canned food, whole harvests for months on end. If your older home has a basement, and most homes built before 1980 do, you already own the beginnings of a root cellar. The coolest corner of that basement, the one on the north side, away from the furnace, is nature giving you cold storage for nothing. Our ancestors did not fill their basements with junk. They filled them with the winter food supply, kept perfectly by the ground itself. We paved over that wisdom with a second refrigerator and a rising electric bill. Therefore, we come to the real question, the one that has been sitting underneath everything I have told you. If these systems are this simple, this cheap, this reliable, and this old, why did they vanish from the American home? Why did your grandfather know how to do half of this and you were never taught any of it? And this is where the story stops being just charming and starts making you a little angry, because the disappearance of this knowledge was not an accident. Somebody benefited every single time a family gave up their well, capped their cistern, filled in their spring house, and got hooked up to a line with a meter on it. Every home that went from free water to metered water became a customer for life. A well that a family dug once and used forever brings in no monthly revenue. A meter on a pipe brings in money every 30 days until the end of time. You do not have to imagine which one the water business preferred. Think about the arithmetic from the other side of the counter for a moment, because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. A family that digs one well, sets one tank up high, and drops in one hand pump has solved their water problem for a lifetime and possibly for their grandchildren too. That family is worth nothing to a water business. There is no repeat sale, no monthly charge, no meter to read, no late fee, no rate increase to pass along at the next town meeting. But take that same family and run a pipe to their kitchen with a little spinning dial on it, and now they are an income stream that never stops for as long as they live in that house. Multiply that by every farm and every homestead in a county, then in a state, then across the whole country, and you begin to understand why so much energy went into convincing rural America that the water it had used for 200 years was suddenly no good. This was not a conspiracy of shadowy men in a back room. It was something quieter and more ordinary than that. It was simple business incentive, repeated 10,000 times, each connection making perfect sense on its own, until an entire nation of self-reliant families had traded a thing they owned outright for a thing they would rent forever. And it went further than simple sales. As the 20th century rolled on, the cistern and the rain barrel and the hand pump were quietly relabeled. They stopped being called self-reliance and started being called backward, unsanitary, old-fashioned. Something only poor people or strange people did. That reputation did not grow on its own. It was cultivated decade by decade, in the same years that utility connections were being extended into every corner of rural America. The message was constant and it was clever. Real, modern, respectable people get their water from the company. Only the odd ones out by the county line still catch the rain. And it worked. It worked so well that today, a man can stand on a property that gets 30 inches of rain a year, next to a running creek, above a shallow water table, and still believe with all his heart that the only possible source of water is the pipe the company ran to his house. That is not ignorance. That is a story that was sold to him. The Amish simply never bought it. But they did more than refuse to buy the story. They quietly kept the older, deeper knowledge alive, and buried in that knowledge is the one technique I promised you at the very beginning, the method that turns cloudy rainwater and runoff into clean, safe drinking water with no cartridge, no chemicals, no electricity, and nothing you ever have to buy again. This is the piece almost everyone is missing, and once you have it, the entire off-grid water picture is finally complete. So let me tell you where it came from, because the history is the proof. Go back to the year 1804, to the town of Paisley in Scotland. A man named John Gibb ran a bleachery, and he needed clean water for his cloth, so he built something new. He layered sand and gravel into a bed and ran his water slowly down through it, and what came out the bottom was clean. He had so much clean water that he began selling the surplus to the townspeople by the bucket. That was the first slow sand filter. And here is the part that turns a curiosity into a lifesaver. 50 years later, in the 1850s, when cholera was killing people across London and a physician named John Snow was proving that the disease traveled through contaminated water, this very same slow sand filter turned out to be the thing that stopped it. The water pulled through those beds of sand came out safe to drink, and the death rate dropped where the filtered water flowed. This is not folklore. This is the birth of clean public water, and it did not run on electricity or chemicals, it ran on sand. Sit with that history for just a second, because it is the credibility this whole idea rests on. Before there were treatment plants, before there was chlorine in a tank, before a single utility existed to send you a bill, the thing that first made city water safe to drink was a bed of sand and the patience to let water move through it slowly. Whole cities were saved by it. The death rate from cholera fell where that filtered water ran. And the technology never got more complicated than sand, gravel, and gravity because it never needed to. It was already finished in 1804. Everything that came after, all the pumps and chemicals and monthly charges, was added on top of a solution that already worked. The Amish and the old farmers understood that, and they kept building the simple version on their own land long after the rest of the country decided the only safe water was water somebody else treated and sold back to them. Here is how it actually works, and this is the part that feels almost too good to be true. When water sits and passes slowly through a bed of fine sand, a living layer forms right at the top surface, a thin biological skin the old text called the schmutzdeck. That living layer, along with the sand beneath it, does the cleaning. It physically traps the particles, and the tiny living organisms in that skin actually consume the harmful bacteria in the water. This is not a screen. It is a living, self-renewing filter, and the numbers on it are staggering for something so simple. A properly matured slow sand filter, the household kind you can build in a barrel, removes somewhere between 90 and 99% of bacteria, along with the parasites like Giardia and Cryptosporidium that make people so sick. Studies on these household filters have measured removal of Giardia at essentially 100% and Cryptosporidium above 99% from a barrel of sand that you build once, that runs on gravity. That never needs a cartridge or a replacement or a plug. And now, the best part, the part that makes this yours this weekend. You can build one, a food-grade barrel, a layer of gravel at the bottom, a deep bed of clean, fine sand above it, an outlet pipe, and a way to pour your rainwater in gently at the top. That is the entire machine. You keep a few inches of water standing on top of the sand so the living layer stays alive, you feed it your collected rainwater, and clean water comes out the bottom. It cleans itself. The living layer regenerates. There are no consumable parts to buy, ever. This is the exact principle that saved London from cholera, scaled down to sit in the corner of your garage or your barn, built for the price of a barrel and a few bags of sand. The knowledge existed for 200 years. It was quietly pushed aside and replaced with cartridges you have to buy again every 3 months and treatment plants you have to pay for every month. But the Amish and the old farmers never let it die, and now it is sitting right in front of you, finished, proven, and free. And let me be clear about something, because a skeptic is right to ask it, and I was that skeptic once. I am not telling you to rip out your plumbing tomorrow and drink pond water. I am telling you that every one of these pieces is real, proven, and yours to add at your own pace, starting with the easy ones. You put a barrel under a downspout this weekend. You add a first flush diverter next month. You set a hand pump over a shallow well in the spring. You build a barrel of living sand when you are ready to trust it, and you test it the way any careful man would. Piece by piece, you move from a home that depends entirely on a wire and a pipe you do not control to a home that could stand on its own if it ever had to. That is not paranoia. That is exactly what your great-grandparents called being a responsible head of a household. They would be baffled that we ever gave it up. So put the whole picture together, because this is what those families out in Lancaster and Holmes County have understood all along. Count them with me, because there are 11 pieces here and every single one runs without a meter. The gravity feed that makes pressure out of nothing but height. The old farm windmill that pulls water from deep in the earth on the wind alone. The hydraulic ram that lifts water up a hill on the force of water falling down it. The hand pump that works on the muscle in your arm in the middle of a blackout. The compressed air system that stores power quietly and delivers water on demand. The rain barrel and the cistern that harvest the sky. The first flush that keeps that harvest clean. The spring house that refrigerates without a compressor. The ice house that stores the cold of January into the heat of July. The root cellar that borrows the steady chill of the earth beneath your own basement. And the barrel of living sand that makes cloudy water safe to drink. The sky fills your barrels. Gravity or a windmill or a ram pump running on nothing but falling water lifts it to a tank. Height gives you pressure with no motor at all. A cistern stores the surplus. A spring house or an ice house or the cool of the earth in your own basement keeps your food without a compressor. And a barrel of living sand makes the water clean enough to drink. Every single piece of that runs without a meter, without the grid, without a monthly payment to anyone. It is not a fantasy and it is not the past. It is a complete working water system, and men have been living on it free and dry and comfortable for 200 years. In plain sight, while the rest of us were taught to believe it was impossible, here's what I want you to feel tonight, because it is bigger than water. Somebody decided a long time ago that you should have to pay every month for something that falls out of the sky for free and runs downhill on its own. And they made you believe that paying was the only respectable choice. It was not. It never was. What you just learned is not new. It is old, older than the light bulb, older than the country in its current form, and it was quietly taken off the table so that you would keep reaching for your wallet. You just took it back. If you are the kind of person who believes that real, practical knowledge has been deliberately pushed aside to protect somebody else's monthly profit, then you already know exactly what to do next. So tell me one thing in the comments, and be specific, because I read them. Which of these did your own family once use? The spring house, the cistern, the ice house, the hand pump, or the root cellar in the basement? Somebody watching remembers one of these from their grandparents' place, and I want to hear about it. So type it out and leave it below right now, even if it is just one line. And if you felt something click while you were listening, if you felt like you just recovered a piece of something that was quietly taken from you and your children, then subscribe and stand with the rest of us who are digging this knowledge back up before it disappears for good. We are not a channel. We are people putting the old wisdom back into our own hands, one buried system at a time. Because the next thing I am going to show you is how these same families heat an entire farmhouse through a Pennsylvania winter without an oil truck, without a gas line, and without a heating bill, using a single fire and a wall of stone that stays warm until morning. That one changed everything for me. I will see you there.